A low blow for Putin. India is refusing Russian oil. The tap to Moscow has been shut off. Trump's multi-move strategy in action. The American president and the Indian prime minister have struck a deal behind the Kremlin's back. A sensation. Russia surrenders without a single shot fired. China is seizing the Far East. Is the collapse of Putin's pseudo-empire really happening? Reality? China's shocking plans. Russia's shadow fleet is under attack. The EU is blocking Putin's ships. And now there's also a food crisis in Russia. Meat is disappearing, prices are skyrocketing, and people are in shock. I'll tell you all the details in just a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I am Victoria Panchenko, and here are the latest events. Russia is being torn apart, and Trump is launching a daring multi-step strategy. Venezuela is under control, and the money from oil is in the pockets of the US. The goal is simple and cynical: a financial safety cushion for America and total control over the oil market. And now, a low blow for the Kremlin. Russia tried to dump cheap oil on India, but the plan fell apart. Trump and Modi quietly shook hands. Instead of Russian oil, India is now being supplied with Venezuelan oil. The result? The oil tap for Russia is being shut off, Moscow's influence is deflating, and the US is rewriting the rules of the global market. And here is the evidence. The President of America, Donald Trump. Trump claims that Indian Prime Minister Modi, in a conversation with him, agreed to halt purchases of Russian oil. The head of the White House posted a corresponding statement on the social network Truth Social following their phone call. According to Trump, India is ready to increase purchases from the US and possibly from Venezuela.
This will help stop the war in Ukraine, which is ongoing right now and is claiming thousands of lives every week.
The American leader emphasized that Washington agreed to immediately lower the trade tariff for India from 25% to 18%. Modi will agree to expand purchases of American goods, the US president stated.
India will move forward to reduce its tariffs and non-tariff barriers on the US to zero. In
turn, the head of the Indian cabinet wrote on social network X that he had a wonderful conversation with the American leader, but Modi remained silent about the situation with oil from Russia.
I am very pleased that the tariff on products made in India will now be reduced to 18%. When two major economies and the world's largest democracies work together, it benefits our peoples and opens up tremendous opportunities for mutually beneficial cooperation.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
It seems that the oil market has turned out to be the main black swan for the Russian economy. As of mid-January, Russian Urals oil was priced at about $41 per barrel. At that time, the discount on Russian oil was about $20. This indicates a significant gap in the supply chain. The 2026 budget is based on oil prices of $59 per barrel. This is higher than some forecasts and clearly does not take the current discount into account. Even so, the budget is still drawn up with a deficit. If India refuses Russian supplies, then the budget gap will be even greater than what the authorities are forecasting. And this threatens difficult and unpleasant decisions, such as raising taxes or cutting civilian spending. And yet another stab in Putin's back. India has confirmed its support for a just peace in Ukraine. This was stated by the Indian ambassador to Ukraine.
India supports practical engagement of all interested parties. As Prime Minister Narendra Modi said, this is not an era of war.
The ambassador also emphasized that India remains one of Ukraine's main trading partners, pointing to potential cooperation in the fields of digital public infrastructure, manufacturing, green energy, and new and promising technologies.
Indian companies would be happy to play a role in the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine.
Putin barely had time to recover from the Indian blow before another one landed. China has bared its teeth in Chinese media. An explosive scheme made waves in the information space. A plan to take control of a significant part of Russian territory. And if you think globally, this is nothing less than a scenario for the collapse of Russia. The scandalous article was published back in December on the Chinese media platform NetEasy. 7 million square kilometers of Russian territory under the control of the Celestial Empire. Not a bad start. China's interest in the Far East is understandable. These are lands that Beijing considers historically its own. Doesn't this remind you of something? Putin's so-called special military operation in Ukraine. The author, who wished to remain anonymous, is sounding the alarm. Because of Russia's war against Ukraine and the redeployment of troops to the west, the Far East is practically left unprotected. The territories have been left almost undefended with only 50,000 soldiers. The author calls them an empty shell, plus the population is also small while the resources are enormous. This is a separate blow to the economy. The materials emphasize that Russia is rapidly deteriorating and its GDP is less than that of a single Chinese province.
If chaos breaks out in the Russian central government, problems could easily flare up in the Far East. And if Russia really does fall apart, the 7 million square kilometers of the Far East should not be lost in vain. China has learned this lesson the hard way.
At the same time, he warns Beijing against a direct military takeover, emphasizing that this would lead to global encirclement, just like what happened with Crimea, which was occupied by Russia in 2014.
A more reasonable approach is to be more accommodating, to continue investing money and human resources, to sign long-term contracts and support pro-Chinese forces in the region, nominally independent but in practice dependent on Chinese support. In
the publication, there is also a tough message. On its own, Moscow is not capable of effectively controlling the region. That is why China helps fill the gaps, securing its vital interests.
Do outside powers want to intervene? With the diplomatic support of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, this becomes very difficult.
It serves as a reminder of the ruthless law of geopolitics. History teaches that territorial vacuums are always filled.
This land in the Far East is a treasure for China, but a burden for Russia. China's assistance is mutually beneficial, but one must beware of external forces. The US from the Bering Sea, Japan from Hokkaido, and South Korea. They too are eager to claim their share. China's strategy is to act cautiously and quietly. And
the cherry on top. The author concludes that 7 million square kilometers of land cannot be lost as it concerns security and resources.
External powers want to intervene with the diplomatic backing of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This is very complicated. And
on top of that, there's also a hunt for Russia's shadow fleet. The EU has decided to completely ban the provision of maritime services to Russia in order to block Putin's shadow fleet. And the British Navy chased away a Russian vessel that had stopped near underwater cables. Here are the details.
In the EU, maritime services will no longer be provided to Russian ships. This ban will be included in the 20th package of sanctions.
Basically, every vessel that arrives at sea relies on certain logistical points. That's why there are so few trips to Antarctica, because there's no logistics. Not because it's dangerous or cold there, but because there's no logistics there.
According to the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Kaikal, the main package of sanctions is planned to be adopted on February 24th. It will also include measures in the energy sector and regarding fertilizer trade.
If the European Union's maritime infrastructure stops servicing Russian ships, it will make navigation more difficult for them, especially in such. These are the major global hotspots and the busiest hot roads, particularly across Northern Europe and specifically in Rotterdam, which serves as the largest port in the region and stands as one of the biggest, most essential ports in the entire world today. Across the European continent, along the vast eastern Atlantic coastline, and throughout the waters of the Mediterranean Sea. And now, add to this the significant fact that Russian naval vessels often make voyages, not only between Russia and China, but also to European ports, which accordingly will be closed to them. These are serious losses.
The French Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jean-Noël Barrot, clarified that the sanctions will include especially tough measures specifically targeting Russia's shadow fleet, with the aim of completely blocking the movement of Russian shadow vessels.
What we are currently witnessing, the procedures for detaining individual vessels of the Russian shadow fleet, one must understand if there are. In my professional opinion, there are not even 24 precedents to consider. Well, for example, if we look at those 24 cases, that only represents about 1% of the entire fleet. It is not so much a direct action as it is a clear signal, a very serious message indicating that things could potentially get much worse for everyone involved. Or change your behavior? Nothing more.
On January 27th, 14 countries of the Baltic and North Seas issued a joint statement. In it, they warned that they intend to hinder the activities of Russia's shadow fleet tankers. Vessels without clear national affiliation will be considered stateless ships, which gives coastal countries the right to detain and inspect them.
But this isn't only connected with the Russia-Ukraine war, formally, first and foremost. But by and large, this resurgence, or rather this clarity, became a consequence of Russia's aggressive actions in the Baltic Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and the North Sea, where the Russians, to be even more precise about the situation, these are ships directly linked or connected to various Russian ship owners, or those closely affiliated with the Russian Federation, which, as a general rule, are currently subject to strict international sanctions imposed by the European Union, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Ukraine. Are, from our point of view, essentially engaging in sabotage activities. On
Wednesday, January 29th, the Royal Navy of Britain tracked a suspicious Russian vessel that, for 14 hours, was almost directly above the underwater data transmission cables in the Bristol Channel.
And as a result, those same detentions of shadow fleet tankers that were fleeing from the US Coast Guard were carried out with the support and cooperation of the British. Similarly, the detention of a shadow fleet tanker by the French was also conducted in coordination with the British. The British government and its various agencies are the most deeply and consistently involved, on a formal and strategic state level, in the execution of these specific activities.
Some countries have already started to independently hinder the Russian shadow fleet. French Navy ships detained the tanker Grinch, which, according to French authorities, was coming from Russia under complex flags. German authorities did not allow an unregistered vessel not listed in any database into the Baltic Sea, the tanker Arcosat, which was heading to the Gulf of Finland. According to Bloomberg, after this, 2 other oil tankers from Murmansk turned around off the coast of Norway and headed back.
Trouble never comes alone. Meat has almost disappeared from Russians' tables, and expired goods have taken its place. According to the sellers themselves, the number of shoppers in stores has decreased by about 40%. Prices have risen sharply. This is only the beginning of the food crisis in Putin's Russia. After all, you can't spread shaheeds from the defense industry on bread. More on the causes and further development of the impending famine coming up.
Shortages and empty store shelves are returning to Russia. Retail chains in the Russian Federation are actively reducing their product range due to the population's lack of money. Buyers they don't choose between different products. Now they just chase discounts in stores. Without them, most people cannot live from paycheck to paycheck.
All kinds of defrosting pancakes, God willing. Noodles. Delay from work. Overdue for the most part.
Entire stores and markets selling expired goods are opening in large Russian cities. Long lines form for moldy sausage and meat with a smell. And for bloated canned goods. For something better, with the Kremlin's current policies, most Russians, especially the elderly, simply can't count on it.
Our whole country has expired products from stores to markets, and all the pensioners go to the market only for these products.
Even for those who earn decently by Russian standards, prices in regular supermarkets in 2026 are noticeably biting.
You might feel like you want to burst into tears, simply because of how incredibly high these prices have become. I start to break down and cry when I look at everything I see.
The prices. Since January 1st, everything in Russia has become more expensive, from food and medicine to gasoline and appliances. The reason for everything is the increase in VAT. Its increase by just 2% starting in 2026 threatens a rise in prices for almost everything in Russia by nearly a third.
Girls, I'm honestly shocked by the prices. Just take a look. 2 little bags cost me $5,000. I didn't buy anything. How much money did I spend? This is just insane.
But even this isn't the limit. Analysts say that food prices in Erefia will only continue to rise. Remember how recently stores were putting metal tags on butter? Because of the price increase, they were even putting it in special cases. The average price for a pack is 230 rubles. Now it seems that chocolate has taken up this baton too, so people don't steal these precious sweets.
Yes,
Have you even seen this? Now, even chocolate is being hidden in those cases in the region because prices are just skyrocketing. It's already 159 rubles. People are being forced to steal. They can't even afford to buy a damn chocolate bar. And that's why they're putting them in boxes so they don't get stolen. That's how it is, guys. And
The reason for all this is the previously mentioned increase in VAT from 20 to 22%. At first glance, it might seem like it's just 2%. But here's the catch. Value-added tax is a tax that runs through the entire supply chain and in fact affects everyone from the manufacturer to the transporter. From the transporter to the store, from the store to the customer. With each new link in the chain, the final product's price automatically adds those very Kremlin 2%. So the longer a product's supply chain, the more expensive it becomes. According to Rosstat, dairy products have increased in price by about 35%. Canned goods have gone up by a quarter and chocolate candies by almost half. There were various reasons for this. In some places, raw materials became more expensive. In others, logistics failed somewhere and importers ran into problems elsewhere. But all of this happened gradually, over several years or a year. But now, just in the first weeks of January, people have felt the price increases, especially sharply. Today, food prices in Russia have practically caught up with the average European prices, if not surpassed them. But the quality has remained the same, just like the wage levels across the border. 3,000 rubles. Today that's about $40, just to make the simplest vegetable salad. You'll have to spend a quarter of that amount, about $10. For comparison, in Poland, at the local Żabka supermarket chain, you can find the same vegetables for half the price. Although just literally a month ago, the prices were different. For example, in the first months of the new 2026 year, cucumber prices rose by 25%. Tomatoes went up by almost a third, and peppers have become nearly twice as expensive. As for the meat section, as Russians themselves joke, lately it's not recommended for the faint of heart to enter. In some stores, you have to pay almost 400 rubles, or about $5, for half a kilo of ground meat. And that's already a fully European price level. In some cases, meat products in Russia are even more expensive. No one in Russia is in a hurry to buy pork trimmings at the price of beef or regular beef at the price of elite Wagyu meat. As a result, retail chains in Russia have already started actively cutting staff and closing the lion's share of their locations. No one is going to maintain so many stores, even in a hungry but impoverished country. Prices are rising gradually, so the current inflation is not the limit yet. Businesses are already in shock. Some entrepreneurs are considering closing down. To avoid spreading panic, Russian propaganda has dressed up the widespread bankruptcies of retail chains as optimization, but that doesn't change the essence of what's happening.
This optimization is happening against the backdrop of a transformation in retail with shrinking store spaces and declining purchasing power among the population. In the near future, analysts believe that consumers seeking a wide assortment will go to premium stores or shop online. Small businesses will have to develop their own retail, work under private labels, or leave the market.
This is especially true for villages and small settlements, where often small shops and stores are the only access local residents have to any products. Most of them won't even make it to spring.
People are still trying to buy less, one way or another.
And by how much has the customer flow decreased approximately?
The customer flow has probably dropped by about 40%. And
it will only get worse from here. As Russians themselves admit, since 2026, a whole range of products has become inaccessible to them. And the list keeps growing every day with each new price increase.
Do you eat beef often? I don't eat it at all. I don't eat meat at all. Well, what can I say?
So, in Russia, almost every second person has become a vegetarian out of necessity and desperation. Even the residents of Russia themselves joke about it.
Listen, I actually feel sorry for those people who eat meat. It must be so hard for them. I just don't even know. Well, it's tough. So just now I went down to the market. I thought I'd go take a look. I was even curious because I heard prices had gone down. Nope, not at all. They've actually gone up. By how much? By a lot, honestly. For example, that same beef you mentioned, getting a decent piece of meat now costs almost 1,000 rubles. Per kilogram, it's really not much of a pleasure, you know. I don't know how people who love beef manage.
It would be funny if it weren't so sad. According to Western analysts, the real poverty line in Russia is 3 times higher than the official one. Yes, and according to Russians themselves, it's practically impossible to survive on 15,000 rubles a month, which is the minimum wage in Russia, or even on 25 or 30,000. As a result, thanks personally to Putin and the war he started in Ukraine, more than half of Russians have incomes below the real poverty line. And even today, many can barely afford meat or fish at least twice a week. And with each passing month, there will be even fewer such lucky ones in Russia.
Friendship is no longer there. Many of Russia's allies and partners in Asia have distanced themselves from the Kremlin. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, China, and even Turkey have taken a stance against Russian influence. What is the reason for this? All the details are in the report.
Long-standing friendships are falling apart at the seams. As Bloomberg reports, the Kremlin's longtime allies in Central Asia and the Caucasus are building ties with China, the European Union, Turkey, and the Gulf countries, seeking to protect themselves from further aggression by Moscow. They are trying to minimize risks and are looking for ways to distance themselves from Russia as much as possible.
Asian countries are reassessing Russia's role in the modern world and their own relationships with Russia.
The lesson that Central Asian countries have learned from the full-scale invasion is that Russia is committed to its strategic goals, no matter the cost. Kate Mallinson, partner at Prism Strategic Intelligence Ltd in London.
To the series of Russia's diplomatic failures, another one has been added: deterioration of relations with Kazakhstan. Even though Putin is loudly proclaiming a great friendship from every possible platform.
For Russia, Kazakhstan is also one of the largest trading partners in the Commonwealth of Independent States and in the Eurasian region overall.
Kazakhstan has long been demonstrating a cautious but confident distancing from Moscow. It refuses to support the war against Ukraine, does not recognize the annexation of Ukrainian territories, conducts exercises with NATO, and is developing transport corridors bypassing Russia, including through the Caspian and Turkey. Tokayev openly states Kazakhstan's principled position right to Putin's face.
We do not recognize either Taiwan or Kosovo, or not South Abkhazia, not South Ossetia, not Abkhazia. And it appears quite evident that this principle will also be applied to the so-called traditional and historical state territories, which, from our specific perspective and assessment, include the regions of Luhansk and Donetsk.
Against this backdrop, Russia resorted to energy blackmail. Moscow effectively blocked the export of Kazakh oil, July 22, 2025. Russia unexpectedly imposed restrictions on the export of Kazakh oil through Novorossiysk. This is the key route for exporting oil from Kazakhstan. The official reason given was environmental concerns and technical issues. But in reality, this is a political signal. Astana has gone too far in pursuing its independent foreign policy. Against this backdrop, the energy blackmail looks like a desperate attempt to regain lost influence. However, the effect is likely to be the opposite. Kazakhstan will accelerate its integration with alternative economic blocs, building closer cooperation with China, Turkey, and the West.
Yes, within the framework of the Eurasian Economic Union, we do have disputes, since we meet not only in open sessions, but sometimes in closed ones as well.
My colleague said that there are sometimes disputes, not always with us. A dispute. In the closed sessions, we always argue.
And that's not all. Last year, Russia began requiring owners of cars assembled in Kazakhstan and imported in 2024 to 2025 to pay an additional recycling fee. A fee with increased coefficients. Kazakhstan is preparing tough retaliatory measures against the Russian automotive industry. The authorities of the republic are proposing to sharply increase the recycling fee on cars imported from Russia and Belarus by as much as 40 times. In this way, Astana has taken steps to weaken economic ties with Moscow. In addition, this week the president of Kazakhstan, Tokayev, effectively accused Russia of financial fraud. According to him, last year about $14 billion were transferred from a neighboring country through a Kazakh bank to other countries. Tokayev noted that from the standpoint of law, economics, and even politics, this is an outrageous fact. The president of Kazakhstan did not specify which country he was referring to. The Moscow Times writes that in his speech, Tokayev was unambiguously hinting at the aggressor country Russia. Besides Kazakhstan, Russia is losing another ally, as Uzbekistan is also distancing itself from the Kremlin. The Kremlin launched a large-scale campaign against migrants, and Tashkent responded harshly. Uzbekistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has stated that there were human rights violations during the raid by Russian law enforcement agencies in Moscow on June 25th and is demanding an investigation into the deaths of its citizens. Tashkent insists on the protection of the rights of Uzbek citizens working in Russia, despite the tightening of Russia's migration laws. Predictably, Uzbekistan is striving for a multi-vector foreign policy, distancing itself from Russia's direct influence in the political sphere.
That is, for a long time, the perception of Russia as the successor to the Soviet Union, a major world power, in one way or another influenced, for example, the Asian countries that previously kept their distance into Russia's sphere of influence. And as for those countries that were not within Russia's sphere of influence, they still regarded Russia as a rather significant global player.
Against the backdrop of Russia's rapid withdrawal from the post-Soviet South, other forces are taking its place. First and foremost, Turkey and China. Turkey, already de facto dominates in Azerbaijan, is strengthening its influence in Armenia and is actively engaging with Kazakhstan.
Probably, among the Asian countries, Turkey was the first to challenge Russia. We remember the incident with the downing of the Russian plane, but overall Turkey has long positioned itself as a global player, essentially on par with Russia. They are quite comparable to Russia, and Turkey does not behave as a junior partner toward Russia. But lately, we have been witnessing how Asian countries are no longer seeing Russia as a serious threat.
China, in turn, is deepening its economic and logistical cooperation with Kazakhstan and other Central Asian countries. Beijing is seen as a more predictable and economically beneficial partner than Moscow.
Asian countries are now reorienting themselves toward new centers of power. First and foremost, of course, China, but Turkey is also not wasting any time and is increasing its influence in the Turkic world, which in principle encompasses not only Central Asia, but also a significant part of the modern world.
After the full-scale invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent severing of Moscow's economic ties with the West, China became Russia's main partner. In recent years, trade between the two countries has been growing at an impressive pace. However, in 2025, growth suddenly turned into decline, showing that the no-limits friendship spoken of by Moscow and Beijing does, in fact, have its limits. Deutsche Welle reports that in 2025, the volume of Russian-Chinese trade decreased for the first time in the past 5 years, by as much as 7%, down to approximately $228 billion. Turkish drones, Chinese investments, Western diplomatic missions, and regional alliances without Russia are replacing the Russian world.
In the case of Asian countries, things are much more complicated than, for example, with European countries. And diplomacy there is built on somewhat different principles. That is, I think that the leaders of many Asian countries will continue to show formal respect to the Russian leadership for quite some time. But at the same time, it is clear that the perception of Russia itself has changed dramatically. And now no one perceives Russia anymore as some kind of ultimate player in Eurasia that will dictate its terms to everyone in the region.
The Russian dictator has to pay with the loss of influence over allies. Furthermore, considering the severe damage to his international reputation, Putin is now decisively losing the very complex geopolitical game that he himself once aggressively imposed upon the entire world stage, undermining his own strategic objectives in the process.